Good morning, everybody. Well, what we are looking at here, if you're new to this particular build update series, this is a Ziroli 1/5 scale F8F Bearcat that I started basically on the 1st of October, and now about 3.5 months later, what we are looking at is a ready-to-fly airplane. Now, obviously, it's not quite finished. Still got some work to do on the canopy. Have to paint the cowl, get the rest of the markings on. A little bit more paint. But if I threw a prop on this... Oh, sorry. If I threw a prop on this bad boy, I could fly it tomorrow. Now, unfortunately, up here in Michigan, it's 4 below outside and 10 inches of snow. So that's not going to happen, but that's okay. Since the last video, so much stuff has been done. Everything is on the inside. Everything is in its place. Everything is good to go. Like I said, I could put fuel in it and fire it up right now, if I had a prop. But some major changes that you haven't seen yet, we'll be able to see in a better light. I went ahead and decided to do the panel line detail. Probably a little difficult to see because of the glare, and also the material, not necessarily the material, but the color that I used. Hold on. Very loud. I always had the TV going in the background because it makes certain people angry. Kind of makes me laugh. But normally for putting panel lines on a covered airplane, I would tend to use black, very thin black lines, such as what I did on my P-47. As you can see, the panel line detail is all done in black, which looks good. It makes them very visible. But this one, I decided to use a different, kind of a different color of silver. So the fuselage is more of a like a bare aluminum silver color, very reflective, which, as I've gone over already, is part of the reason I hate it, because you can see a lot of stuff through the material, which still pisses me off, but I'm slowly getting over it. So I went with a metallic silver, 1/16 inch wide, for the pinstripe, for the panel line detail. And as you can see, you can clearly tell they're there, but they don't jump out at you quite as prominent as if they were black. But it really gives it a good look, at least I think it does. I went ahead and used 1/8 inch black striping tape to simulate the trim tabs on the ailerons and elevators, and that turned out really, really well. The canopy is mounted, and I decided to keep it completely removable. There will be no adhesive at all, just a whole bunch of these tiny little button head screws on there. And I did some cockpit detail. That is the most you're gonna get out of me. I don't do cockpits. But with the Bearcat, obviously being a scale aircraft, having a pilot bust in there is an absolute must. And having the armored seat rest or seat back, and there's a lot of different names for this here, but basically it's just it's like a roll gauge or roll cage or a crush guard, and this is used to basically save the pilot from breaking his neck in case of a nose over. So having that type of detail in there is extremely important because it's a really big part of the airplane and it's extremely noticeable. So not having it in there, yeah, just wouldn't look good. And I have put all the markings on except for the cowl. These came from Cali Graphics, and as usual, they are really, really good quality. Printed vinyl, but real good stuff. But yeah, printed vinyl right here. This is all done with the new cover covering, and trying to make a straight line go all around the airplane, that is not easy to do with covering. because this is not paint. This is covering directly over covering. No poking holes, no trimming underneath, directly over top. And as you can see, 100% bubble free. Absolutely perfect. But that's a very difficult thing to do, because I think this is about 1.25 inches wide, at least the white stripe is. You can't just cut a straight piece of covering and wrap it around a round fuselage that is round this way and gets narrower toward the tail. So this piece is actually shaped like a question mark. So it took some trial and error, had to make some templates, but it actually went pretty well. So I'm very pleased about that. The cowl is completely finished. It's ready for final prime and paint. This is actually how you get it from Ziroli. If you buy it from Ziroli, it comes pre-primed. Maybe, I don't know if it's a primer or if it's just what's in the gel coat when they set up the cowl. I'm not sure, but I am going to do a final prime on it. As you can see, the GT80 is nestled very nicely in there, and I decided to baffle it. I don't think it's necessary, but I did it anyway, just because it's January and I have nothing else better to do. So that's all baffled. Might be kind of hard to see, but on the underneath, cut some slits in the back of the cowl to allow for proper cooling. And yeah, I think that should work out really well. Gear and everything is basically on there permanently now. The gear are finicky. They are giving me some trouble. The trouble is getting them to work initially from an empty air system. But once they start working properly and you keep air in the system, it'll hold air pretty much forever and they'll work just fine. So at this point, I'm not extremely concerned about it, but hopefully it's just because the seals might be a little dried up in there because my basement's cold and dry in the wintertime. As you can see from the side, those gear covers do look really nice on there. So yeah, I've been pretty busy. It is all programmed. Everything is literally ready to go. I just have a bunch of little odds and ends to do. But if tomorrow was supposed to be 70 degrees and sunny and grass, I probably would be tempted to go fly it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on pause here for a second. I'm going to take this thing apart and kind of show you what the inside and everything looks like, and kind of show you all how everything is installed and all that good stuff. So hang on. Well, it was probably a blink of an eye for you was a very back-breaking task for me, because flipping this thing around by myself and getting it on the stand in a very typical 1950s basement, yeah, pain in the ass. Anywho, so as you can see, our installation is very spacious. Yeah, just very easy, very simple to do. Sometimes the more space you have inside an airplane, it can be even more difficult to figure out where to put things, because you do have all this space. So I like to keep everything as simple as possible. My air tank is sitting just on a piece that is glued underneath here, and it's got just a little bit of goop holding it down and some Velcro straps so it can move around, but I can also take it out if needed. Same thing with the fuel tank, just made a couple braces and a platform, and that's secure. Ignition and receiver batteries, just made little platforms for them to be Velcroed up here, right up in the nose. And super fancy, super high tech. Let's check this out. The receiver sits on a piece of 1/4 by 1 inch balsa with a little block underneath of it, all Velcroed on, so it's got some wiggle to it. And even the antenna mounts, they do have some flex as well. Everything in here can move, and everything is secure, so it can't flop around, but nothing is under tension. None of these wires are being pulled on. None of my antenna wires are being pulled on, and it works out really well. Only one servo located in the fuselage. I mean, all this fuselage, there's only one servo in there, and that's for the rudder. I know I've gone over this, but I have 2 push rods on the rudder. Both are carbon fiber from here back, but the front and back end of both of them are 440 push rod. This one here with the clevis is for the rudder itself, and I put a piece of carbon tube over the 440 portion of the push rod to eliminate any flex. So now that is very rigid. And this one here is for the tail wheel, and that's left unsupported, so it has a little bit of give, because I want that to have some flex, because if I have a lot of cross loads on that tail wheel, like on a crosswind landing, I don't want to blow my servo out. But these servos are very, very strong. That's the Pro model, or 270. Fantastic servo. I did change out the Sullivan steel control horns and went in with the with just the Dubro giant scale style. Those Sullivans are really nice, but I don't think they were intended for giant scale. They just have they have too much flex. I doubt they would be a problem, but yeah, I just decided to play it safe. Why not? Up in the nose section, before I baffled the cowl, I had it figured that I could reach through the cowl and hit my choke. I just have a piece of 440 threaded rod going to the choke on a ball link, and the push rod runs through this little block to keep it from flopping around too much. So a real nice and easy choke. But those slits that I made in the cowl, I can probably reach just an angled piece of an old push rod in there and actually hook that and actuate it that way. So that'll still work just fine. Ignition also is relatively soft mounted, which like I said, it's very important to keep, even though today's electronics are not as sensitive to vibrations as they were, like back when I started flying. But a lot of these practices have stuck with me throughout the years, and it's definitely not going to hurt anything to keep things, nice and tidy and keep them the way they should be. Because even though this stuff is designed to be able to absorb being rattled around, why beat the daylights out of things if you don't have to? I think we'll go ahead and move this onto the bench so we can take another look at the engine box, and you can see how I've secured it in there. But yeah, same thing on the wings. I did away with the Sullivan control horns and went in with Dubro giant scale, and they work really. And they don't look as nice. Those Sullivans were awesome because they're stainless, they're pretty to look at, and these are just these giant black pieces of plastic, but they work good. I still have to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm going to make little doors to put in there. I'm just going to iron them down. Like, I'll make this little piece that covers this the main body of the gear, but I won't actually screw them into anything. I'll just use basically just like a 1/4 inch strip of this covering and just cover it to the airplane. So, yeah, that should work. And once again, I'm not proud with how the gear doors turned out, like how they fit up in the wing, but it is what it is. That's the sacrifices we have to make when you're using a non-scale gear. But when it's in the air, you're not going to notice any of that stuff anyway. So no biggie. Alright, let me transport this thing over to the surgeon table. Hang on. Okay, now we're back up on the bench with it. And in the better lighting, you can see there's not a whole lot of panel detail on the fuselage itself. There's really not a whole lot. There's more that needs to go up around this area, but I'm trying to figure out if I want to do that before I paint the black strip on the top. Because I'm just worried that if I put all the lines up here and I mask this area off to paint the black, that it might peel these off. I don't think they will. This stuff sticks pretty well. And because it is vinyl, what I'm going to do is, once I'm completely done with it, anywhere they have a connection point like this, I'll take my small monocoat trim iron and just tap it. And that will really melt that area in, so you won't have to worry about them peeling up. Because right now, yeah, I mean, I've already been over this with microfiber rags. It doesn't have any tendency to want to peel those lines up or anything like that. So that turned out good. Look how reflective that is. I mean, that's why I'm so unhappy with the actual finish of the airplane, is because of the reflectiveness of this film. Oh my God. I mean, it is my fault. You know, these areas turned out the way they did because I did not sand the airplane good enough. But I'm also extremely used to using a much thicker material like monocoat. Now, if I would have covered this in navy blue, you wouldn't be seeing all this. You'd notice it a little bit, but not much, because that blue covering's not reflective. I need to quit talking about that. It's just pissing me off. Yeah. Oh well. The switch that I've decided to use for the ignition is a 2-in-1. We got on-off switch here. These are Miracle switches from Valley View. Miracle has made great switches forever. And this is a 2-in-1, so you got a switch and the fuel dot. You know, it's not scale. I'm not going to hide it behind a door or anything, but it's aluminum colored, so why not? And these switches have just a killer detent. I mean, they're not going to move. And even though I have telemetry on my transmitter, it still has the charge port right here, or what I'll be using it for is to plug my voltmeter in. And same thing on the other side, because this is a bigger airplane and I have a ton of time invested into it. 2 switches for the receiver, 2 jacks so I can charge them with my voltmeter. Perfect. Also an aluminum color. This is the fill valve, if you will, for the air system for the gear. Now, let's get more involved in the nose section here. So the last time, I think I had everything on there, but it wasn't quite finished. So now, the engine box, you can clearly see the glass. This is like 2 or 6 ounce glass cloth. Pretty thick stuff. So I glassed the engine box to the nose of the airplane. I think I already had the firewall pinned. I'm pretty sure I did. But then I went one step further, because once again, triangle stock and a strip of fiberglass is not enough to hold an engine box to the nose of an airplane, especially when you have a big heavy engine like this, and there's going to be probably 1 or 2 pounds of lead weight stuck to each side of this engine box. So what we have is, on each side of the box there are 2 quarter 20 bolts. They go through the firewall, through the tri-stock, and through the nose of the airplane into blind nuts on the inside of the fuselage. So now, even if for some miraculous reason the tri-stock glue joints were to break loose and the fiberglass cloth were to break, the box cannot separate from the nose because there are 4 quarter 20 bolts holding it on there. So as you can see, you really can't reinforce it any more than that. It's in there pretty good. And when I ran them through, I put epoxy and micro balloons on the end of the bolts where they meet the blind nuts so they can't come off. And the reason I did that is because there's no reason to ever have to take these off. Because if I take these bolts out, it doesn't mean the whole front end comes off. The front end's already permanent. So there's no advantage to having those bolts be removable. Oh, excuse me. A little trick, I can't remember where I learned this, but I figured out about it years ago. When you're routing your ignition wires, they always tend to be in the way, and they can be difficult to kind of secure to the airplane so they don't rub against the cowl or rub against the firewall or something. So all I do is I just take a piece of a zip tie, I take a zip tie, zip it to the wire, so it does have a little bit of play, but not much. and then cut it off with about a 1/2 inch little piece sticking out, and just use a small screw and secure it. So now it's in place, it's secure, but yet it can still move. Perfect. Nothing wrong with that. All the wiring is, once again, everything is so it's not going to rub or chafe on anything, but yet there's no tension on anything. Nothing has tension on it. I cannot stress the importance of that. Make sure no wires are being pulled in any way, shape, or form. So that all turned out well. This is just a breather hose that's going to stay inside the fuselage. It's so the carburetor gets the same air pressure all the time. So that's probably not important because this tube does angle back, but we'll see. I did add a block behind the carburetor up on top of the firewall, just because, you know, these carburetors are known to spit a little bit of gas out, and I just rather it not have a direct path right to my throttle servo. So that should be fine. If anything, I can take like a piece of 1/8 inch balsa and make like a little hood or something. I don't think it's going to be a problem. And now I know somebody's going to say something, so let me just get it out of the way. Someone is going to say that carburetor is too close to the firewall, it's not going to work. Well, that's the way they are. Look at a DLE 55. When I mount a DLE 55 to a firewall, the bolts that hold the engine or the carburetor to the engine are almost touching the firewall, and there's barely enough room to get the choke open. As you can see, we still have plenty of room. It's perfect. So yes, it will be fine. I think that is about it. I don't really have much more to go over. Minus the things that are just, you know, nagging away at me with the finish. It's gonna be a really nice airplane when it's done. It is. Unless when I take it outside those imperfections are highlighted even more, then that will just be devastating. But oh well. It's just a toy airplane. I'm gonna end up, you know, removing the engine from the dirt with a shovel eventually. So there's no point in, you know, losing my mind over it. Once again, Cali Graphics, great stuff. What's cool is I had this band on here, the white band, before I got my markings, but I didn't put the red stripes on there yet. I didn't want to do that until I got the graphics from Cali, because according to the pictures that I have, this red here and this red here are supposed to match. So I didn't want to wrap this until I got my graphics. And it turns out the new cover red is a terrible red. It's kind of like Monocoat Missile Red, but different. And I don't like Missile Red. I like True Red. True Red is a beautiful color. Missile Red is, yeah, okay. This is just a really weird red, and I've never really cared for it. But the new cover red is almost a perfect match for the markings. And what you're seeing through the phone is not the actual color, believe me. Because through the phone, this probably looks like a washed out orange, but no, it's actually it's red. Yeah. Now, I have been asked about the tail. I've had a couple comments, you know, because when you look at it, everything looks pretty proportionate. But I've had someone say, well, there's a blue stripe missing at the top. Well, no, there's not. This color scheme, there are 3 stripes that go back and 1 more above. Now, depending on what picture you look at, will depend on how this overall situation works. Now, the way this is laid out, as far as where it lays out on the fuselage, this particular scheme started out with an F8F-1 Bearcat, which had about this much shorter rudder on it. Okay? So that's what this was originally intended for. But when the F8F2s were being used more and more, because the F8F2s had the much longer vertical fin, and that was because these had some pretty substantial uh, lack of rudder authority. So they made a much taller vertical fin, and these were painted on some of them. They were painted exactly the same. In other words, the spacing in this area was the same, but it left more white up here. Now, eventually they ended up moving these stripes to where, you know, this line was actually up here, or this line was actually down here, and they changed the orientation of the stripes on later airplanes to where this was a little bit more proportionate. There's even one where it was moved so far that this blue stripe was actually like right here. But this is just the way I did it. Now, this is a tribute airplane to Charlie Chambers. So this is going to look just like his, but his was an F8F1, where mine is an F8F2. I'm not going to do an F8F1. The tall rudder on a Bearcat is just one of those features that sticks out and makes it a Bearcat, so I had to do that. But I like the spacing here. So yeah, it's a little different up there, but I like this, so I stuck with it. And there's very little, should I say, authentic information for these particular Bearcats and these schemes. There's a lot of renditions. In other words, you know, picture, you know, like artwork type pictures, you know, that kind of thing. Or, oh, what's the word? I just totally drew a blank. Anyways, but you know what I'm saying. Like when you go on Google and you type in, you know, F8F Bearcat color schemes, you get pictures, but they're not actual pictures of the airplane that was, you know, originally like that. There's a ton, but nothing really authentic and original. And one of the photos I found of this particular scheme with 2315 being on the front end of the airplane, it does show it with the F8F2 rudder. So at least somebody did a plastic model like this. So that's good enough for me. And once again, you can clearly see that those metallic silver lines over top of the silver covering look really good. And of course, just, you know, black for a trim tab. I didn't do a rudder trim tab because it goes right in here, and there's already a whole bunch going on right here. I didn't want to add any more. I think it's fine. It looks fine, just as it is. And I've been working on this thing in all different angles sitting in the cradle. And when it's in the cradle, you know, this stupid thing's like up here. And I realized if I set it on the mufflers and the tail wheel, it's perfect, and it's off the bench. So that made working on the canopy really, really nice. Now for the canopy, I used a 1/4 inch vinyl tape, also a metallic, you know, silver type tape, to do this portion of the canopy. Back here is a much wider strip. I have some on order. I'm going to try to tape this. Hopefully it'll go around that contour. We'll find out. If not, then I'll just mask it and paint that a silver. I also have some silver paint coming for the cowl. I'm going to try several different types of paints, because this is the most unique silver I've ever used, just because of how reflective it is. But anyways, back to this stuff. So for being just a vinyl tape, I mean, this is one piece that goes all the way around here, and it wrapped around so well. It left a couple little creases and crinkles along the way, but I just came back with my monocoat trim iron and just kind of smoothed them out, and that's great. It's been on there for over a week in my dry-ass basement, and it's not trying to shrink or shrivel up or anything. And another thing is back here, you can clearly see that I put two pieces together to make the proper width. Now, why would I want to put two pieces together? Because it's got a seam in the middle. Well, that actually makes it look more convincing that this is a functioning sliding canopy. Because when you have two pieces with just a little, like a 16th overlap in the middle, it gives it that appearance that these are two separate pieces here. So I think that looks a lot better than just going with a half-inch strip and calling it a day. Just my thought. Oh yeah, and on the cowl, you remember I had those little slits cut on the bottom, but there's also holes up here in the fuselage. So when air goes through, goes between the baffles, the air is forced around those cylinders, and now I have exit air out the top and bottom. So there's plenty of exit air. I might end up blocking these off actually, at least these top ones, because I don't want too much air going into the fuselage. It does have a pass-through because the tail wheel assembly is open, but now that I'm thinking about it even more, I think I will block these off. I'll leave these two in here because that's still forcing air to go past the cylinders and either down and out or in this way. But the more I'm thinking about it, I really don't like these up here because that could cause more air to come in and bypass the cylinders and just go straight in through there. So yeah, I think I'll clog those up. No big deal. No big deal at all. All of this has been sealed with epoxy. I think the mounts are going to be fine. I always have bad luck with mounts. They usually break. But, you know, they're very simple. They're all epoxied together. They're real strong. And they should be all right because, you know, the GT80 is one of the smoothest running twins that's ever been produced. I mean, these are just, because they're so rock solid and durable that they absorb their own vibrations almost. They're just tanks of engines, and they're fantastic. And this is going to have 1 or 2 pounds of weight in the nose, definitely one to start. And I can't remember what they're called, like lead, what, ingots? I don't know, it's a fishing thing. Basically, it looks like a little bar of gold, but it's only about yay big by, you know, yay wide, and they're 1 pound. And I'll be able to screw them to either side of the engine box. Because I know typically you would put the weight on the inside of the cowling, but I don't like doing that. I mean, it's less weight overall that you're going to need because it's really far forward. But now it's putting all that extra weight on the cowl. It's going to put that wear on the mounts, and I'd rather not do that if I don't have to. I might put a little bit of weight up there, but we'll see. Because I'm hoping to get away with just putting 1 pound in the nose. That's my goal. Because remember, because this is not glassed and painted, the ass end of this airplane is pretty light. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And not only, you know, taking in consideration, you know, everything behind the center of gravity is, you know, light, but look at everything that's behind the CG. I mean, a good portion of the wing is behind the CG, and all that stuff is covered, not glassed and painted. So I did save an awful lot of weight. So we'll see how that goes. And you may or may not have noticed, but the work area is extraordinarily clean. And I wonder why. So I am on the fence on what I'm going to do. Because I'm basically down to just, you know, fiddling with this thing off and on. You know, I just realized I never checked to see if the canopy was straight. We're going to find out together, folks. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I seriously never actually stood in front of it and checked it to see if it actually was straight. Boy, that would have sucked if it was off. But that looks damn good. All right, cool. Anyways, so I'm on the fence if I'm going to start working on this again. I know 100% that if I started working on this now, I could have this ready to fly by spring. I just don't know if I have it in me to do any more of that. Because I built, from scratch, I built a frickin' Ziroli Bearcat from start to flyable condition in 3 months. That's insane. So I don't think I have it in me to do any more on this. So I do have a couple. I know last year I said I wasn't going to do any more sport planes for a long time because I have so many sport planes. But there's so many I want. So I don't know. There might be some different stuff in upcoming videos. We'll see. I think one for sure. There's a 25 size airplane I'm going to build this winter. My dad had one back in the early 90s, and I had one in the early 2000s, and I want to build another one just because it's a really cool airplane. So as soon as I make that decision, I'll fill you in on exactly what it is I'm talking about. But I'm thinking about this. We'll see. I'm sure I'll do a little bit of work on it, but I don't know. We'll have to find out. All right. I think I covered just about everything. Literally, because I covered the airplane. That was stupid. I apologize. But I think we're pretty much all good to go. I know my last video was to talk about the FR Sky equipment that I've been using, and it was kind of brought to my attention in a way, but not really, that I was trying to convince people to switch from their current radio brand to FR Sky. Now,